According to Forbes, some of the world's biggest tech companies have collectively laid off more than 150,000 workers in recent months. Amid layoffs and restructuring, it's crucial for employers to recognize the feelings and accommodate the needs of the remaining employees who are dealing with not only seeing their team members lose their jobs, but also personal challenges as well. I'm Joe McIntyre, host of Yo's Back to Work. On this episode, Kayla Lebovits will join us to discuss ways to keep everyone together and keep those remaining employees motivated each day. Kayla is the CEO and founder of Bundle, which is a personalized virtual solution that helps organizations invest in their employees' professional development, well-being, and engagement. Kayla, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me here. I'm great. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to talk with you.
Before we get started, Kayla, maybe you can start with just a little bit of your background, how you got involved with employee professional development, how Bundle got started, and how you got to where you are today.
Not the straight and narrow path to Bundle. I started my career in finance and just witnessed that a lot of the employees I worked with were not getting the resources and tools they needed to perform at work and also feel good about what was going on at home. And specifically, I saw a lot of working parents struggle with that specifically. They were disengaged at work. They were dealing with childcare issues and just personal issues, and also trying to climb the corporate ladder. And I felt like companies could be doing a lot of more to, put their money where their mouths were. So that kind of got me started on the road to Bundle. I applied to business school with the idea that I wanted to working caregivers, or at least start there in the workforce. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. I got into business school. I quit my job. I moved to Tel Aviv, Israel, to work at the largest VC firm there, Pitango, just to really get a sense of what the entrepreneurship world was actually like. And I found that I wanted to be the founder at every single one of those meetings that I was in. And that really got me started on to where I am today. In business school, I founded Bundle, and it's gone through many iterations and many pivots. We first started in supporting working caregivers, but now we really support every employee because every employee has needs and is dealing with different well-being and professional development needs that are not being addressed by employers, and they really are asking employers to help them with those things. So whether you have kids or not, whether you're junior or senior in your career, everyone is looking to succeed professionally, and also be well at work. So it's been a long journey since then, but now we are really looking to support every employee through different professional development and well-being solutions. So that's basically 2 minutes of talking. That covers 7 years of my life.
Yeah, hard to bring all that history into a concise statement, but I did it well. Obviously, for some people, hiring is through the roof. For some organizations, I think we just saw the jobs report, 500,000 jobs added. However, there's been some pretty serious layoffs in some industries, specifically in tech. Can you talk about a little bit what's behind some of these layoffs and how you expect it, or if you expect it to continue over the next 18 months?
Unfortunately, I do think we're going to see it continue over the next probably 12 to 18 months and perhaps even a little longer. I think, unfortunately, a lot of companies thought the COVID and the result and what came from COVID would last forever. And that's clearly not the case, right? We're moving into the next phase of the world post-COVID. And some of the trends that happened during COVID will still exist, but a lot of them won't. And so companies overhired and made bets that didn't really pan out. And unfortunately, people's jobs and livelihoods are the result of that, or losing that, or the result of that overhiring and just bad bets on where the economy would go. So I do think it's going to continue for potentially up to 2 years. I do think you'll see it more in certain industries than other. Obviously, tech was really benefited from COVID. When you look at companies like Zoom and Peloton and companies like that, they obviously had really big growth, a lot of growth during the pandemic, and it didn't last past the pandemic, or it's maybe just stabilizing, but they just overhired and they don't need all the employees they thought they did. And so unfortunately, those are the industries that you're going to see the most layoffs. I think you'll see other industries as well, like retail, finance, entertainment. They're not so far behind. A lot of them also overhired during COVID. And then just there's so many fears of the recession. Are we in a recession? Is recession coming? Has it already happened? There's just so much uncertainty in this post like COVID world. And then a lot of people are getting scared and their first thoughts are just like lay off people, like cut expenses really quickly. And unfortunately, that's the environment we're in. It's so confusing with the jobs report. Like, wait, we're adding jobs, so why are all these layoffs happening? I think it's very industry specific right now, and very dependent on how a company was progressing during COVID and how it was impacted by COVID, whether positively or negatively.
I think when people see, hundreds or thousands of layoffs, that's certainly a jarring number and jarring to hear. But when you get to that more personal level, you hear about one person's experience with getting laid off or losing their job, it can be even more devastating. Can you talk about just some of the effects that come from layoffs, not just in the people who get laid off. Obviously, they're losing their job, but some of the effects that maybe managers may not think about when it comes to layoffs at the company. So thinking about maybe the people who stayed, the people who weren't laid off, but have to deal with what can be now a challenging work environment.
Yeah, I think obviously the people who lost their jobs, it's a whole nother story, but the ones that are still there's a level of uncertainty that happens after layoffs, right? You're like kind of like, is that it? Am I next? Why am I still here? Why did my colleague get fired? Like, is it because they believed in me? Is it because I had a cheaper salary? Like I think there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknowns after layoffs for employees that are still working. And I think the most important thing managers and leadership can do after layoffs is just be very like transparent to the point of almost being vulnerable and just being honest. Like, are they sure that these are the last of the layoffs? What is their plan going forward? Just being as transparent as possible. I think employees really appreciate that. If it is the last of the layoffs, what is the plan with current employees? How are they going to support them, right? Less employees, but still the same amount of work. How are you going to kind of address like all the responsibilities need to be spread around? People could get nervous that they're going to have to take on basically 10 more jobs in their one role. So I think being transparent, even if you don't know, even if there's not a plan yet, I think goes a long way to just showing employees that you're trying to figure out and do the best by them, but you might not be sure yet. And then what are the plans to make sure that people don't get burnt out, to make sure that you're growing in the right way and that you're still professionally developing, even though there's less bandwidth, there's still more responsibility. So I really think it comes down to that open communication, transparency, and being vulnerable. A lot of loyalty gets built that way. It's when you're hiding things from employees that they get scared and then they might just leave because they're afraid of getting fired or afraid of not, reaching the potential that employers now are expecting them to reach. So I really think it all comes down to just honesty, like 100% transparency, even if there's not a plan for everything, that's okay. Employers are also people and they're trying to figure this out on a daily basis. I just think having that open conversation and having giving employees opportunity to also express their concerns, because if employers don't know what employees are feeling, they may not know how to address it. So I think it's a two-way street with like open communication, and that will be the way that you'll keep current employees motivated and keep them feeling like I want to be at this company, I want to help this company through this difficult time because they're doing the right thing by me and being honest with me. And so I'm going to be honest with them and do my best. And when I'm struggling, I'm going to be honest about it too. So I really think it sounds maybe too simple, but I think just that's the place to start, having that open line of communication on both sides.
Is there a certain level of a certain level of manager maybe that this honesty should come from? So should it come from someone's direct manager, so one level above, who may not have made those decisions to lay off people, or should it come from the very top, or kind of a combination of every kind of level of the organization to kind of bring that honesty?
I personally think it has to come from the very top and then trickle down. I think that leaders have to own up to maybe bad decisions that were made in the past few years, and just own it and let that trickle down to managers. I think also if a company grew excessively, probably a lot of the managers could be new managers and they might not know how to deal with these things. So providing that training of this is how you talk to employees, this is how you help them, this is how you make them feel comfortable to open up. I think it has to come from the top and then trickle down and make sure that managers know what their roles are, know where they can help like spread the message. And I think it has to be a combination, but I definitely think managers have to know what leadership is thinking and how to translate that down. So I really think it's everyone coming together and working together to make sure that people are staying motivated, morale is high. There's still trust going on. There's a lot of trust that's always like lost during layoffs. And I think trust is like one of the hardest things to rebuild at an organization. And it will impact like managers and leaders and everyone. And that can lead to a lot of downfalls. So again, being open from every level, no matter where you are at the company, will help rebuild that trust. But I think it really takes leaders and managers working together. If it's too siloed, then there'll be just a lot of miscommunication and a lot of mixed messages.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned honesty is obviously being one of the most important, if not the most important component of retaining staff during layoffs. What are
Mhm.
some other strategies to kind of create an environment where employees and especially remote teams can maintain those motivation levels when they may have seen, a colleague be laid off, or they may kind of fear for their future of their job? What are some strategies to kind of keep those spirits up in the midst of these challenges?
First thing like is acknowledging it and actually like potentially like mourning the loss of those colleagues, right? Acknowledging it. In order to move forward, you have to like talk about what happened. So letting employees be heard, talking about the feelings that people have, and giving that time to build back trust. And then I think it's actually showing your current employees that you're still here, we're still here. This is what we need to do to bring it to the next level so that we can hire more people eventually. And so I think it's even doing simple things like team building exercises, team lunches, like doing a little extra for the culture, because that's what people need in very tough times. Whether it's, again, doing a team building exercise that's more fun, or doing like a wellness session together, whatever it is, like these little culture exercises could actually go a long way in building team cohesiveness and repairing relationships with management and leadership. So it doesn't take that much effort. It's not that expensive to make the team have lunch together, or do a power hour where you all work together and just talk, or do a team building exercise in person or virtual. There's tons of different options that are not expensive and don't take a lot of time planning, but can go a long way to show that you are trying to rebuild that culture of trust, and really move forward while acknowledging what has happened.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned this a few seconds ago, but
Yeah.
a lot of those new managers, or those managers, are new. So they probably didn't have to deal with these layoffs in the leadership role that they have now ever before in their careers. It can be stressful, as you talked about. So, what is your best advice to them on how to personally manage what can be a difficult process? Not, how they go about explaining it to their workers or their colleagues, but how do they kind of deal with the stress of, like, it's kind of on my shoulders. That's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, you're like basically like getting rid of someone's livelihood for the time being, and people have families. I think having those managers be honest with their managers, and potentially, using benefits at the company or whatever it is, if they have like, different types of resources that you can use to like talk through it, not ignoring it. Obviously, managers in their careers will have to make tough decisions and do difficult things. And this comes with being a leader and being a manager. Not everything's always fun and easy. So I think it's taking advantage of benefits of the company. If there's different wellness resources or coaching resources you could take advantage of, to talk about it maybe with someone outside your manager if you feel more comfortable doing that. But like acknowledging it and actually dealing with it versus just ignoring it, because it is really tough to look someone in the face and tell them that they no longer have a job. And I think it's building that skill set to learn how to like deal with that anxiety and stress, and how you move forward with it and just become a better manager from it. So I think it's actually taking advantage of maybe things that seem like touchy feely, like wellness type resources, but those things go a long way in allowing you to deal with just like the pain of letting someone go.
Yeah. I mean, is it possible to go back? I mean, we we mentioned going back to normal so many times now over the past 3 years, but after layoffs, I think there's probably this desire to kind of, okay, let's level set and get back to kind of where we should be, or get back to normal. But for many people, this is not a normal situation. So, how do you kind of get back to some sort of stasis where employees are feeling okay, and feeling comfortable in their jobs? How do you go about doing that beyond just honesty? And how long do you think that does that usually take to kind of have people feel comfortable again in their careers?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to define normal anymore. I feel like things have been normal for like a few years now. But I would say, honestly, I think it's just time. I think
Yeah.
with anything at time, it depends on the team, it depends on the leadership. I think it can take a long amount of time if the right people, if the wrong people are in are in leadership roles and not really trying to move the company forward strategically, while also being cognizant of the fact that people have needs outside of just doing work. They need to be taken care of. It's not just about getting the work done, getting the final project done, but like, how are they doing? How is the team doing? I think, again, it's just a lot of it's just time, but then making sure that you have a strategy about how to move forward. Not just like, okay, all these people were let go. Now it's all go back to like what we think is normal. No, how are we going to move forward with a smaller team? How are we going to check in on each other and make sure everyone's okay? How are we going to make sure you're not overwhelmed or stressed? Like, there has to be check-in points along the way. It can't just be like, let's just go, hopefully in a few months, everything will go back to normal. No, there is no what is normal? Who knows? Let's just check in with each other and make sure we're still all on the same page. We're also working towards the same goal while also like taking care of each other. Because when you take care of each other, that's how you will succeed professionally as well. It's very intertwined, professional development and well-being and morale and all that. So I really think it's time and having leaders in place who can provide those check-in points and allow employees to feel psychologically safe, that they can actually talk about how they're doing, how they're feeling, and then go from there. I think when things are like shrugged under the rug, they only will come to bite you in the end. So it's really just moving forward with that transparency and really making sure that your team is okay. It's one thing to like be performing, but are they okay, right? At what expense are they performing? So I think it's making sure that you're thinking about all these ripple effects that can last from layoffs, and just from people feeling like insecure about their jobs and their performance.
Yeah, it seems like there may not be a better time to invest in professional development than at a time like this, for your current staff saying, "Hey, I know we're going through some tough times. That said, we are putting all of our efforts into investing in you and your career, making sure that you have all the resources that you need, for the most part, to do your job well." So, is that really the case? Is this really, it can be probably tough to admit that this is the best time to invest in your current people, but it feels like it's got to be the case, right?
I think it is. I think like, it's interesting when like you talk to people, they're like, oh, our budgets got shrunk. We just did layoffs. We're not really like bringing on new resources. Well, how the heck are you going to keep your current employees, right? Like, what
Right.
about them, right? So you need to retain them, and not only retain them, you need to like engage them and have them feel like part of the company, part of the culture. If anything, you need to do more now than you were doing before, because after layoffs, a lot of trust gets lost and people aren't as loyal to companies. They're like, okay, I was spared this time, but will I be spared next time? Like, I'm just dispensable. So I think that, I think it's like, it's definitely now more than ever. And when you think about it, there's lots of generations in the workforce right now. If I'm wrong, I think that there's 5 generations currently in the workforce, and all of them have very different needs professionally. Some are farther along in their careers, some have just started their careers, and so they need support in different ways professionally. And I think that's up to leadership in the company to recognize what solutions can we bring into place to help people that are in all different phases of their careers and personal lives. There's not like a one size cookie cutter solution for everyone. It has to be more personalized than that. And so I think there's no better time to invest in employees. I think if anything, you can be more purposeful with the way you invest in them, because your team is smaller and you can really grow leaders from these times. Like, these are the people who are at your company. You can grow loyalty, you can grow future leaders. Then when the company is ready to bring on more people, you're even at a better spot than you were before. So I think it's a really good time for a company to look in themselves and say, how are we going to keep the people that are now here performing, happy, healthy, and everything that goes with that? So I think there's no better time.
Yeah. And maybe switching gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've entered a bit of a hybrid, remote, whatever you want to call it, world. I think probably in many ways that's a good thing for people who may have been laid off. There's so many more opportunities to work in a number of different places. But for companies and I guess managers who are dealing with these layoffs, is it more of a challenge when someone's working remote, to kind of go through that decision? Kind of loses the personal touch of having someone in your office and being there to kind of oversee any sort of challenge, whether it be layoffs or someone who may not have been laid off and is kind of struggling. Is it more difficult? Is it easier? Are there things that need to change when it comes to managing layoffs with remote population of employees versus in person?
Yeah, I personally think that it's harder when
Mhm.
your employees are remote. So after you do layoffs, like if your company's remote, like you're just having these video calls and moments in time where you're seeing employees. Lots of times you get on a call and you talk for maybe 30 seconds about non-work stuff and you jump right into work, right? Because you scheduled this 30-minute meeting to talk about this issue. So you're not getting you're not seeing employees, like their behaviors, like how are they doing? You're just seeing that moment in time. You're not seeing them by the water cooler, by the bathroom, by the cafeteria, whatever it is. So I definitely think it's harder with remote employees because you can't really get those like cues that you might see if you're with them. And even just the checking in, it's like you got to schedule a meeting to check in, right? You can't just walk by their desk and say like, let's meet, like, an informal meeting. So I think you have to be more purposeful when it's remote. You have to be more intentional, which takes more effort. And sometimes it's hard and, people get lazy. But I think if you have to be way more intentional with managing employees remotely, because it's hard to really get a pulse on what's going on because you're just seeing them in moments in time instead of seeing them throughout the day. It's just so different. So I think that it has to be more purposeful and intentional. Even if that's more effort, it will go a long way. And if you believe you can build a company with a remote team, like you have to want to make those intentional decisions to really make change at your company and keep people motivated. If you don't, then you don't even know what people are doing at home. You don't know like how they're feeling. You don't know how they're doing. You have to be intentional about even if it's just creating a process and a structure of checking in and having a strategy for moving forward. It's so much easier in person than it is remotely.
Yeah, it can be so tough to gauge where morale is remotely. For people who are struggling and kind of want to say something, but are maybe unsure how to go about explaining to their managers or their manager's manager, whoever, that they are having a difficult time, and they want to be delicate and make sure that they're not, coming across as complaining. Are there any strategies that you have for people who are not having a great time at work, are struggling a little bit in many different ways, going about bringing that up? Is there a best practice to talk to your manager about those tough times?
So I would look at the company's like benefits and resources and try to get external help that
Mhm.
there's no, you can't get fired for it. It's just, so many companies have amazing benefits and resources that employees do not know about. And unfortunately, they only know about them when they need them. But first, I would look to see if there's some sort of resource where you can talk to another individual or get some sort of training to have those difficult conversations. You'd be surprised at the different resources that companies do have. If that's not an option, practice on your friends and family. Like practice role playing, having those difficult conversations. It's hard sometimes to lean on colleagues because you don't want to like create drama in the workplace, and you also sometimes don't know where colleagues like their loyalties lie. So I think like again, look at your resources internally at your company. Who do they work with for professional development, for training, things like that? Use your friends and family as well. And then you can have a plan going in. Just to go in to talk to your manager and kind of like vomit on them how you're feeling, like that's not going to get anywhere. I think going in with a plan saying, this is how I'm feeling, this is how I'm doing, this is how I want to fix it. What do you think? Like having some sort of structure will make you feel less nervous about it. And when you go in, your manager will appreciate that you almost came with an agenda and that you're actually coming with a solutions mindset, but you need their help to get there. But I think it's not so easy to do that alone. You might need some outside help, and that's okay. So I would recommend, again, looking at companies' resources and then using your own network to almost make a plan and then go in with a plan, so you don't just seem like you're complaining, or you will feel better about going into that conversation and less anxious if you go in with a bit of a plan, and just show your willingness to move forward and showing that you need your manager to help you move forward.
Yeah. Obviously, a ton of layoffs, and you're expecting some more in the next 12, 18, however long. What can
Yeah.
employees do now, whether they have had layoffs in their company recently or haven't at all, to avoid being a part of future layoffs? What steps should they take, um, either in the office, outside the office? What should they do to avoid being part of those?
Yeah, I think unfortunately sometimes it's inevitable and there's only so much you can do, but I do think there are different things you can do throughout your time at the company. So making sure your value and expertise is known, right? It's not saying like take credit for everything and don't be a team player, but just like make sure that your voice is out there. Make sure that if you have value and knowledge in a certain area, like step up and take on new projects, new responsibilities, show that you care, show that you can help move the company forward. Obviously don't have ego, but also don't be too humble, right? Make sure you're taking those opportunities to show your successes by, show them by the results, right? It's not just about talking, show the results of how you can contribute to the team and the benefits that you provide to the company. And then also I'd say express like a willingness to reskill or upskill to fill new needs. This is a time when companies are trying to move fast, they're trying to innovate, they're trying to really beat their competitors. Show that you want to take on those new responsibilities, even if it takes some time for you to pick up those skills, because you'll save your company time from trying to hire externally while also showing them like you want to take on new projects, you want the challenge, and you want to be considered for more like leadership positions. So just considering all those things and making management and leadership aware of your willingness to support like mission critical needs to the company and get a broader experience will just show them that you're there for the long run. And then maybe when it does come to layoffs and your name might be on that sheet, maybe they'll take a few more minutes and think about, okay, this person, Kayla, they did everything they could. They are showing they care. Like, do we really want to lay them off if we don't have to? Like, can we save them because they've shown their value, their expertise, their willingness to collaborate and take on new responsibilities? I think like that's really what you can do during this time. And also keep your head down. Don't get involved in the drama. Do your job. Take care of your team members. Take care of yourself. And just really prove yourself. Like this is a time to prove yourself and not take your job for granted, because unfortunately jobs can be, you get a call one day and your job's done. So I think not taking it for granted and really just showing everything you got is the best you can do.
Well, Kayla, this has been a super great conversation. I hope our listeners learned as much as I did. If people want to get in touch with you, people want to get in touch with Bundle and talk about your services a little bit, how should they go about doing that?
Yeah, so you can always feel free to email me. My email is kayla@bundlebenefits.com. I'm pretty good on my email. And then we have a whole team that's here to talk. The email is wecare@bundlebenefits.com because that is our company. We care about employees and we're trying to make a real difference and impact in the workforce. So wecare@bundlebenefits.com, or feel free to reach out to me, Kayla@bundlebenefits.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, to hear future episodes of this podcast and past episodes as well, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen in. For Yo's Back to Work, I'm Joe McIntyre. Thanks for listening.